South Korea is marking a grim milestone this week. New data shows the country's fertility rate has dropped to a record low. South Korea already had the lowest number of births per woman in the world. But last year, that fell again. The average number of expected babies per woman of reproductive age dropped from 0.81 in 2021 to 0.78 in 2022. That is far lower than in other OECD countries, which have an average rate of 1.59. And correspondent Frank Smith asked people in Seoul why they thought the fertility rate in South Korea was low.
Somebody has to still take care of their children, but because it's so difficult to earn money at the same time and raise kids, people are just choosing not to go through all that trouble in the first place.
A lot of younger people just want to enjoy their lives, which is why a lot of married couples don't have children and instead have dogs. By raising dogs instead, they want to lessen their burdens. Because if you raise a child, you have to spend a lot financially and economically.
The reason why I think the low birth rate problem has not been solved, despite there being numerous policies implemented, is because they're not thinking much about childcare.
Because as the population continues to age, there will be a need for more support for the increasing older generations. And to resolve these issues, I believe we need to give birth to children.
And joining me now for more context is journalist and author Ha-won Jung. Ms. Jung, welcome. Why are South Korean women having fewer babies?
Well, there are a lot of reasons behind South Korea's birth rate crisis. There is a sky-high housing prices that make it a lot for a lot of young people to have the place to live and find a place to live together. Or there's an enormous cost of child rearing that make a lot of young people to give up on the idea of having a child to begin with. And there is this long working hours that a lot of notoriously long working hours that make a lot of young people to think that, rightfully so, that having a work-life balance is almost impossible to have, including having a child and having a career at the same time. But there is also one important factor behind this crisis is that the gender inequality that is very deeply ingrained in the country's family culture and family life that puts extremely disproportionate burden of childcare and domestic responsibility on these women. And also coupled with the rampant discrimination against women, especially married women and working mothers in a lot of South Korean workplaces, make a lot of young women to shun the childbirth and even marriage altogether.
Let's talk about a lot of those factors, but let's talk about them separately. I'd like to pick up the issue of gender inequality and discrimination that you mentioned here. And you are somebody who's reported extensively on South Korea's feminist movement. You are also the author of an upcoming book about that very subject, Flowers of Fire. Is all of this combining together and forming a link between the lowering fertility rate in South Korea?
Oh, yes. South Korea may be externally known as a very advanced country, economically, technologically, and also in terms of the pop culture as well. But the country also, at the same time, has relatively poor records on women's status in society, especially in workplaces. The country has reported the biggest gender pay gap among the OECD member nations every single year for the past 26 years. And the country has been also ranked at the bottom of the so-called glass ceiling index that shows how hard it is to be a working woman in a certain country. And also workplace discrimination. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand this, Ms. Jung. I mean, we talk about South Korea, and as you correctly pointed out, it's a modern economy and has been for many decades. What you are talking about is essentially a very, very patriarchal and a very conservative mindset. How has that not changed and improved?
Well, there are a lot of reasons behind that as well, but I would say the country has basically achieved this economic growth and political democratization that crammed centuries worth of growth and democratization that was achieved in Western countries within the span of just a few decades. And despite all these advances made in terms of politics or economy or in terms of technology, certain cultural norms, they take more time or longer time to adjust and change. And somehow this deeply ingrained the sexism or patriarchal values in the country's family life changed at a relatively slower pace. And
you talked about
one of the
you talked about sky-high housing prices, for example, and fewer benefits to support people to have families. You're talking about a patriarchal mindset. I'm wondering, all of these external factors are things that the government can help with. Does the government not do this or not help because it has always primarily been male-oriented?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is the South Korean government has been spending hundreds of billions of dollars for the past decades to boost the birth rate. And mostly in forms of the cash subsidy for the newlywed couples who have children, or I'm sorry, families who have more than 2 or 3 children. But the thing is, a lot of government support and subsidies and policies and benefits are based on this very strict model of, let's say, traditional heterosexual couples who are officially married. And these benefits leave out a lot of people who are outside these boundaries of traditional marriage. For instance, unmarried couples, like single people who live together without getting married but still want to have a child, or same-sex couples. So for your information, same-sex marriage is still illegal in South Korea. And all the single women who want to have a child without a male partner. And a lot of government, the support system is, the government is offering, the government is not offering the same level of support, or if at all, to those people who are outside the boundary of the traditional heterosexual marriage. And there have been a lot of criticism that the government support or societal support in general have not kept pace with this rapidly changing worldview of these people who are embracing a wider or more diverse form of companionship and family.
Do you think, very briefly, if this will change in the near future?
In the near future, it's really hard to say. One of the reasons is that if gender inequality in family life and the corporate life is at the core of this birth rate crisis, the current government, the current president Yoon Suk-yeol has rose to power last year, partly on a openly anti-feminist platform, and right. He declared he famously declared the gender discrimination no longer existed in the country, and he also promised to dismantle the gender equality ministry that has played a pivotal role in promoting women in society or tackling gender inequality in the country. And also the government recently canceled the plan to recognize a wider range of companionship as family, which was really at the core of this problem in South Korea. So I'm not sure if the government is ready to embrace these structural and fundamental changes that are needed to boost the country's birth rate in the long term and in the short term as well.
Right, we'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. But thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Ha-won Jung.